Thank you to Senator Scherer for his time. The Early Childhood Education and Care Department has a 4-year finance plan that estimates specific funding needs through 2026. You can find that link to that information online at our 2022 election page. Just go to nmpbs.org and click on the election banner. And you can watch Lou's interview with educators and advocates for Constitutional Amendment 1, including Wilhelmina Yazzie. That's online right now at the New Mexico in Focus YouTube page. Now, time to bring in the Line Opinion panel once more to talk about the future of multiple monuments in the city of Santa Fe. Protesters demonstrated in front of the memorial to Kit Carson Monday while honoring Indigenous Peoples Day. In the plaza, dancers and other Native groups gathered in front of the remnants of the Soldiers Monument, which was toppled in 2020. Right now, there's no consensus on how we should move forward with either of these monuments. But let's start with Kit Carson. Native activists and others want it taken down, Julia Goldberg, because of Kit Carson's role in colonizing the West, specifically the Long Walk of 1864, which forced Navajo families from their land with many deaths that happened. Is that step one here? Is that the focus of this argument? Is Kit Carson, that statue, is that when we start, or is this just part of a bigger conversation here?
I think it's part of a much bigger conversation. You know, in the aftermath of the toppling of the Plaza obelisk, the city hired a contractor and had a years-long process of conversations and surveys. That group submitted a report in August to a final report. It's 145 pages long. It has an additional 100-page appendix. Wow. It's very long, in other words, and it was based on, they did a lot of public conversations, again, surveys. And I called the city yesterday to find out where things were at. The city council's having a study session on that report at the beginning of November, and not voting on anything, but starting to kind of unpack what is a very robust report. And one thing that stuck out to me in that report was that the contractors, Artful Life, said they spent the first 3 months meeting with people who thought they were entering a process like Albuquerque had when it dealt with the Oñate statue. There'd be 3 months, the contractor would say, okay, here's what you have to do. Whereas Santa Fe's process wasn't to say, tell us what to do with the obelisk. It was like, unpack everything that's happened and why this is happening. And so you've got 200 pages of people weighing in about racism, about their experiences with racism, about how Santa Fe has dealt with cultural differences, how it should deal with cultural differences. And they did not make a recommendation other than they said, you need to be more transparent, because even people who are on completely different opposite sides of these equations agree on one thing, which is that the city has not done a good job at handling it. And part of that has been that they are not communicating what is going on. I mean, I had to call the city and say, what's going on at this point? So they're recommending that some signage be put up right now where there's a box that says, here's what's happened and here's what's happening next. Here's our process. And that the city needs to decide, are you going to restore the obelisk and put it up? There are two options, they said, was restore it, put it up, and have new language that explains, puts it in context, or put something new up. And create a process to decide which of those things you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So that's kind of where it stands. I think, by the time climate change destroys the planet, something will have been decided. That's my prediction on that.
Whichever comes first, exactly. Yes. Julia, just one more question, Julia, real quick.
Yeah.
The board chairwoman for the Santa Fe Indigenous Center says she's heard ideas for alternatives like a fountain or 2 statues to honor a prestigious Native American and a prestigious Hispanic person. What have you heard about what the alt plans might be if the Carson statue actually comes down?
I don't think there's been any specific solicitation about replacing specific things. There's been conversations in general about public art, and I have heard people talk both about wanting something that is more multicultural, more representing of multicultural rather than triculture or a specific culture, and then a lot of discussions about fountains and water.
Right.
For whatever reason.
That's always safe, a fountain with water. Who hates water? Exactly right.
A statue of Betty White, the one thing we all agree we like, something like that.
That's right. Giovanna, back to the plaza here for a quick second. The base of the Soldiers Monument is still standing, as Julia just mentioned, all it's covered with paneling. But also, as Julia mentioned, it's been 2 years since protesters brought the top of it down. The city has done these assessments, but still no action. At what point must they make a decision on the future of that landmark? Is there something politically that has to happen here quickly, or just, probably better said, for the soul of the community? I mean, this can't keep dragging out and having people at loggerheads like this.
Yeah, I mean, as Julia pointed out, the city is, they've gone through this long process. They're not apparently communicating where they are, and I think with this and other situations like this, the process is really important, and I think they're trying to, honor that and facilitate a space for people to be heard. And I think that's important. So we're talking about process, and then there's product, right? Like, so after the process, what's the product? When are we going to see a resolution? And it seems that we're at the point where a resolution is needed, with that specifically, and generally, because now we're seeing it with other monuments. But I do think that the process is important, and there needs to be time and space and capacity to hear from the folks who are protesting. We have a long history of protesting in this state, in this country. So, I don't think we should be surprised that people are now protesting on an Indigenous Peoples Day. However, how are the public officials responding? How are we creating space for all voices to be heard? And then let's get to a resolution.
Good point there. Daniel, interesting, another gesture this week. Governor Lujan Grisham on Monday voided 4 pre-statehood proclamations that targeted Native Americans during the 19th century. We keep finding these things written into our history. The language is like horrific, even given the times, about hunting Native American people down and killing them. It's just, should we commit to a full audit of everything, put it on the table and say, this stays, this goes, this stays, this goes? Are we at that point now?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is going to rile everybody up, and everybody's going to get their jaws going with what I'm going to say. But, at some point we have to realize our history isn't always pleasant. Right. There's a lot of things that we've done in this country that are not good, that were bad. And I think trying to wipe it away and trying to say, listen, we're going to remove this, we're going to get rid of that, I personally think is a bad move. I think, future generations being able to see that people actually felt this way, thought this way, acted this way. I think that's the guardrail that keeps people from doing bad things in the future. When you realize not only do we hear people could do bad things, there it is in writing that they actually felt this way. I mean, I'm reminded of my time in the legislature. We changed the Constitution. We cleaned up some legal legislation when I was in. I mean, my wife is half Japanese. And when I was in, there was a law on the books in New Mexico that said people of Asian descent could not own property in New Mexico. It was against the law. Still, when I was in the legislature. Now, nobody been prosecuted under that. My wife's on my mortgage. She owns everything. I'm on her mortgage. So at the end of the day, I think in this desire for us to want to quote unquote feel good, we run the risk of forgetting the bad things that made us who we are, good and bad things. Is
it a question of forgetting or ignoring, or is it a question of just sort of reframing and representing these things in a different way?
No, that's a great question. I think when you wipe it away, Gene, you're going to forget it. When it goes away, it's going to be forgotten. And I think that, I think it's a different conversation about statues and monuments. I think some of these monuments that have no real, that have a meaning based on, it's different than tearing down a monument of a person, right? Some of these people, you may not like what they represent in history, but they represent history. And so, I think that at the end of the day, we are losing focus on the fact that not all of our history is great. It's important to teach our kids this bad part of the history that has happened, because if we don't understand our history, we're destined to repeat that history.
But I don't think that we are teaching our kids that. So
you're right. We're not teaching our kids that. We're moving. We're moving to teach them more about other things.
I think that you're assuming that these quote unquote bad things are in the past, where actually they're still happening. I mean, not exactly the same, but it's still happening. So it's not like, oh, that's all over now, let's just leave it.
Well, I think it is. Like, I think when you compare,
I think we have to really look at what part of our history is still our current reality for a lot of people, and address it that way. And this whole perspective of putting it in the books and leaving it is a very dominant culture centered perspective. And if we are going to include the perspective of other cultures that aren't in the dominant culture, we need to be listening. We need to have a process for listening and for moving forward, and for not just saying that it's all in the past.
Process is tough. I mean, South Africa went through this with apartheid years ago. There's been models out there about how to get communities to, as Julia mentioned earlier, you got to get a lot of voices in. I'm not surprised that report's as big as it is. So we'll see.
Jane, I would say too, I mean, it's a really interesting report, and it has more than, it doesn't make a recommendation on the obelisk, but it has a lot of recommendations of other ways to keep having the conversation. My concern would be, I think building a process around expecting people to maybe read a 145-page report might be optimistic,
right.
But maybe I'm wrong.
That's the government way, though. That's how we get out information. Thanks again to our Line panel. As always, now be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics the Line covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. And catch any episodes you may have missed on the PBS Video app on your Roku or Smart TV. Now, October is Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, and the reinstatement of a decades-old bill in Washington could a big role in curbing that type of abuse. Senior producer Lou DeVizio wanted to learn more about the National Violence Against Women Act and some of the mental health factors that contribute to domestic violence. This week on the show, he speaks with Larry Jones, a retired family court judge, and also Joni Jones, a mental health expert and advocate, who's been invited to join Senator Ben Ray Lujan's consortium on mental health.